Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and I'm going to be doing a breakdown of the best Guardian Druid PvP build right now in Midnight. Did you think that the bears were put down into hibernation? You would actually be incorrect, as a new build has resurfaced and is very potent and very powerful at the moment. So if you want to be the biggest yogi at Stanley Park, then this is going to be a great video to watch to be able to get the build, the strategies, and the ideation of what you need to be accomplishing in every single match or world PvP situation to just completely dominate. And if you want to make sure you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So let's start things off with the talent tree, because that is where the most amount of significance has occurred as far as build viability, and we will cover some of the most important components. Now, the first thing that I want to note on the Guardian Druid side of things is the Red Moon. This is a very important damage over time effect that is going to be replacing your Moonfire keybind. This is going to give you crazy damage in a small window of time during your incarnation. We're going to use Mangle to extend its duration as well as generate rage with it. So we're going to be able to spam a lot of raises, which replaces your Maul ability and hits incredibly hard during your incarnation window. Now, one of the reasons Guardian Druid is as powerful as it is because its Apex talent here is amplifying the burst, basically, of our mauls or our raises during incarnation in the first kind of initial window of time. So you can get a really massive hitting maul right off the rip of your incarnation, but you're going to want to make sure you double tap it. I'll go over this when we get to the rotation part of the guide for what you're trying to do, but you'll double tap the incarn to activate the Wild Guardians, and that's when your raise is just going to start absolutely clobbering. Not to mention Ravage, which is just your auto attacks having a chance to replace raise with Ravage, which is going to be your biggest hitting ability. If you get a lot of procs of this, you're going to mow people down. Another thing that a lot of people might be sleeping on with Guardian Druid is Heart of the Wild, especially the cat form. So you can start with a cat form, Heart of the Wild, and just absolutely rip in with huge Feral Frenzy damage and a big Ferocious Bite, like right at the beginning of your burst. That combos in, and we'll review that when we get to the combo section of it. This is going to make you completely unstoppable as far as your burst in the opener. So your burst will typically be something like a Rake into Heart of the Wild, which is just Feral Frenzy when you're in cat form, into a Ferocious Bite, into Incarn to get into bear form, into activating the Guardians here, and then you're going to be just spamming Mangle to extend Red Moon, and then using Raise to do a bunch of damage. You'll absolutely chew anybody up if you're able to pull off that combo as reliably as possible. Now, we do have a Lunar Beam, but Lunar Beam, it doesn't really do a lot of damage. I typically, you want to get it down for the mastery to increase your attack power before you do your damage. So it's like there's a lot of layers here. It depends on like how many layers you want to go into it for the most effective amount of burst. Like how much ramp do you want before you lead into it? But the 10% mastery on this is the main reason that you would want to activate it. The damage from it is pretty negligible. When it comes to PvP talents, Overrun is just a mandatory go-to. This is a 25-second cooldown charge stun. This will allow you to charge to a target, pin them down to finish them, or charge to a healer to pin them to cyclone them. This has very important implications when you're playing almost any PvP. When I'm playing with a group, I take Den Mother. This just amplifies their stamina by 15%, but you can also honestly take it when you're by yourself too, as it reduces stuns by 15%, and given how often stuns are available for rogues right now, this ends up being really valuable in those situations. And then the final PP talent I take is Demoralizing Roar, which is just like a bark skin that can be applied to enemies, which reduces their damage by 20%. So I find this to be the most like effective value from PvP talents, although sometimes I may switch Den Mother for Emerald Slumber to try and get some cooldown reduction, because a lot of your big damage comes from these cooldowns. So if you can reset them a little bit faster, you can get that combo out a little bit quicker. So it kind of up to you if you want to be flipping that playstyle around or not. Another component is the Brambles, which is when you bark skin, you just kind of radiate AoE damage. So you can kind of just like throw all of this out at the very beginning and create a massive swell of damage. So I'll show you typically like what your expected opener is going to be here. I'll just go on the training dummy. So you'll start in stealth. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to Rake. It's going to stun the target, apply a bleed. We'll press Feral Frenzy, which is our Heart of the Wild button. This will get us to 5 combo points to press Ferocious Bite. And then we will press Red Moon, before pressing Incarnation to get into bear form, and Wild Guardians immediately after. We'll mangle twice to extend the Red Moon and generate rage while Feral Frenzy is ticking, and then we will just go crazy on the Maul keybind, basically. So we'll sprint to the target, we use Rake, Feral Frenzy gets us 5 combo points, Ferocious Bite, Red Moon, Incarn, Wild Guardians, Mangle twice to get Rage. This is where you can Lunar Beam to amplify your Mastery, so your Mauls here are going to hit really hard, and you're just rotating basically between Mangle and Maul for your single target burst in the opener. You don't really have a lot of time to stack Thrash. You do ideally want to stack Thrash, but in the opener, I typically just go for that. And it ends up getting a lot of pressure on targets. Then obviously outside of that, you would then want to be working on target or building up your Thrash stacks, because your Thrash is going to amplify the damage to the target, which then by the time we get our next Red Moon here in a second, we'll be able to Red Moon with max stacks. We'll be able to spam Mangle to get Rage here to be able to use it on our Mauls, and we can just rotate between Thrash, Mangle, and Maul basically. And if you really need to, you obviously use Frenzy Regen to be able to heal. Not incredibly complex in that regard as far as rotation. And then the little nuanced things that you can do with the Guardian Druid is you can use the Overrun, like we said, to stun a target and then lead that into a Cyclone. Or you can use Incapacitating Roar, which I do like. You can Incapacitating Roar the targets and then put them into a Cyclone. And that can be like your main kind of like setup window whenever enemies are doing a lot of damage. Obviously, Demoralizing Roar to reduce their attack power, well, not their attack power, but reduce their overall damage. And this is just going to make you really durable. You also do get instant regrowths after every once in a while. So if your regrowth button is glowing, that instant regrowth can do a substantial amount of healing. I also play Ursul's Vortex to pin enemies and keep them closer to myself, so they take more damage from the brambles, more damage from any sort of AoE sources that are going on. I would say you generally don't want to be like overly conservative with your defensives. Like if you start taking damage, just trade out a Survival Instincts charge. I use Barkskin to do damage. I don't even think of it as a defensive because just the extra brambles and such a low cooldown at 34 seconds. And you can obviously almost always immediately recover with Frenzied Regeneration in any type of stressful situation. As far as stats are concerned, I'm just going Haste mostly, just to get more globals out, get more auto attacks, to be able to get more raise procs, hopefully. Or more Ravage procs is my goal with that, and also make Cyclone more accessible. And I'm also not just only playing Guardian Druid, so I've found that Haste is obviously the best one for Boomkin, and it can kind of be a decent counterbalance when playing for Guardian. Now our set bonuses are really good. Raise and Ravage damage increased by 10%, Moonfire by 10%. Raise and Ravage have a 5% chance to activate Galactic Guardian's Moonfire damage to make your next Raise or Ravage strike again at 100% effectiveness. So we're not even really at peak burst available to the specialization. Like when you actually can get to the 4-piece, damage is going to be getting pretty crazy with that. Main goal with the crafting your tier set is to pick pieces that ideally have versatility and ideally have haste and then mastery, and then you want to avoid crit. Any tier piece that's dense in crit, and this pretty much goes for almost any spec in the game, you want to avoid that. So if you look at your tier set and it says that it's like 90 crit and 50 mastery, that's probably the worst option for you. But obviously gloves, 60 haste, 30 verse is exactly what we want. 80 haste, 40 mastery is exactly what we want. And it's going to be able to deliver us a lot of success. Now, weapon availability, at least with Honor, is only crit, so I just kind of picked that up. Again, I was just kind of YOLOing this. If you wanted to be completely min-maxed, you would obviously want to get a haste weapon, which I believe you can actually craft Honor level gear, but it's going to cost you a little bit of gold if you really want to min-max your stats with haste there. We're playing the proc trinket. Just extra primary stat. It almost always triggers at the beginning of an engagement, which is where you're going to do the most amount of damage with Heart of the Wild. So that is also why I like that. And I haven't crafted my embellishment pieces yet because I'm kind of waiting to see if they're going to do any nerfs to any of the embellishments or any buffs to the embellishments this early on. I don't want to craft something and then have to recraft it. But any embellishments that increase your primary stat, any embellishments that increase versatility, these are typically going to be the most valuable options for almost any spec that's at least DPS in the game. So like the Pando Charm can be really good for Guardian Druid as well as other specializations. And that's basically the rundown of it from top to bottom. And I'll flash the talents here because sometimes the talent code gets like out of date whenever I put it into the link down below. But so just take a screenshot of it too if it ends up not working with the link in the description, and it should be able to get you going. But this is a really strong build. You're gonna get a lot of hate messages if you play this, so I'm warning you ahead of time. Okay, I'm warning you ahead of time. You're going to get a lot of hate messages if you play this, but this is the rundown. This is the build, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish with it. And it's still pretty bonkers. There's honestly a lot of tank specs right now that I think are going completely unnoticed. I don't know, because Blizzard has just announced their second major round of tuning, if that means there's going to be continuous tuning past this point. So this build might just get absolutely gutted in the future. We don't know. Time will tell. And if you want to make sure that you know, hit the subscribe button so you can find out and not miss out. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.